And if you grow weary of your duty, you too may become a finger. Come on, give yourself to Rosaria of the Cathedral of the Deep.
Within the Cathedral of the Deep hide sins, dark and twisted secrets, too horrible to exist out in the open. A once holy place of worship that's since been perverted, transformed into the final resting place for many a lost soul. One such example lies within a long-forgotten bedchamber, within the cathedral lost to the deep. Rosaria, Mother of Rebirth, is found within the dark recesses of the cathedral, locked away behind a set of huge double doors. As you approach her bedchamber, a mass of grub-like creatures descend upon you, clearly staged here to protect her. But upon entering her chamber, you can kneel before her, being granted the item that allows you to join her covenant, the Rosaria's fingers. From this point on, it will be your duty to invade and slay hosts of embers, removing the tongues of your victims as a prize for your queen. But there are many questions that must be answered here, the most pressing being, who exactly is our Mother of Rebirth? To understand Rosaria's lineage, we must travel back to a time when Gwyn's first flame still shone brightly, and the kingdom of Anor Londo stood in all of its godly might. The bloodline of Gwyn was the most powerful that the world had ever seen. After all, what could bring down a family blessed by the miracle of fire? But as ordained by the very nature of the flame, the winds of change began to blow within even the halls of the gods. Gwyn's almighty flame was fading. We know this story. We know about the sacrifice, about the madness, the despair. We know that the kingdom of Anor Londo was doomed when Gwyn gave his life to rekindle the flame. But when the patriarch of a family falls in such a magnificent way, the first question has to be, what becomes of his children? Gwendolyn, his youngest son, chose to stay in the collapsing kingdom, perhaps hoping to one day see it restored to its former glory. Gwyn's eldest, exiled from the family, perhaps rejoiced when he learned of his father's demise. But what of Gwyn's eldest daughter, Guinevere, the Princess of Sunlight? The description of the Silver Knight shield reads as follows. The Silver Knights stayed behind in Anor Londo to defend the illusory goddess, and their shields are blessed with her divine protection. As the city began to fall, Guinevere, the people's beloved princess, abandoned them, leaving her brother to cast an illusion of her, perhaps believing that a false hope is better than no hope at all. Why exactly she fled is unclear. She might have feared what would emerge from the growing shadows. Or maybe she just couldn't bear to watch her once beautiful home crumbling into ash, just as her beloved father had. Sometime after fleeing Anor Londo, Guinevere became betrothed to the mysterious flame god Flan. Of this god, precious little is known, but we do know that he sired multiple children with the Princess of Sunlight. And while the identities of these children are never explicitly stated, the description of the Sun Princess ring tells us that she raised, quote, several heavenly children, implying that they were born imbued with certain godly abilities. Guinevere was known as a symbol of fertility, so perhaps a daughter of hers having an affinity for rebirth magic would make sense. Furthermore, upon receiving Rosaria's soul and giving it to Ludlith for transposition, you're granted the bountiful sunlight miracle, which is a, quote, special miracle granted by the Princess of Sunlight. And if this isn't proof enough of their relation, upon completing Longfinger Leonhard's questline, which we'll get into later, he will take Rosaria's soul to the bedchamber in Anor Londo, where Guinevere used to reside. Taken all together, we can confidently deduce that of this marriage between Guinevere and Flan, Rosaria was one of the children born. But how exactly does the daughter of a beloved princess end up here, alone in a cathedral of horrors, with only her malformed followers for companions? And here begins the tragic story of Rosaria's life, captivity, and abuse. Let's first consider what's known about the cathedral and its past inhabitants. Most notably, it was home to a rather infamous Lord of Cinder, Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. Hailing from the icy land of Irithyll, Aldrich became known for his cannibalistic tendencies, reveling in the final shudders of life leaving his victims' bodies. He terrorized Irithyll, striking fear into the hearts of an entire city. that was until Pontiff Sullivan entered the picture. I'm going to try to keep the political discourse brief. So, in essence, Sullivan was attempting to establish his own sect of the Way of White, separate from those already employed by Gwendolen, with Irithyll as their new base of operations. But attempting to establish her place as Holy Lord without first addressing the cannibal terrorizing the city could pose a bit of a challenge. Sullivan needed to do something about Aldrich, as a sign of good faith towards those he wanted to control. But rather than dispose of this disgusting creature, Sullivan saw him as a potential pawn. As Hawkwood explains to us,
let's take Aldrich for one, a right and proper cleric, only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig, then softened into sludge. So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep, and they made him a Lord of Cinder, not for virtue, but for might.
Sullivan saw Aldrich becoming more powerful with each new victim he devoured, and decided that he could make an incredibly valuable ally. But how exactly does one appease a monster like Aldrich? Well, a good start would be feeding, and I mean literally feeding, his most base appetites. The character of the murderous farmer feeding the remains of his victims to his swine comes to mind as we examine the relationship between these two. Sullivan does the work of luring or funneling victims into the cathedral, and Aldrich does the rest. A mutually beneficial relationship where Aldrich gets to satisfy his more unsightly desires, and Sullivan has a convenient way to dispose of political enemies, like Gwendolen. But let's further examine the desires of vicious men. These men will spend their lives trying to satiate a hunger that will only grow as they feed it. But what do they hunger for? A vicious man, to my mind, will hunger for two things: power or dominance, and sex. Through this relationship with Sullivan, Aldrich was able to feed the former desire. But what of the latter one? Let's again look at the bedchamber that Rosaria inhabits. First of all, the fact that she seems to live in a bedchamber gives us insight into her role in the cathedral. As we approach her room, we see an enormous gate that clearly used to seal off the only entrance and exit to her bedchamber. It was at one point severely damaged, as though it had been forcefully pulled apart, allowing us enough space to enter. We'll discuss the cause of this damage shortly. Once we make it inside the room, bassinets line the wall leading to the bed that we find her resting on. And the implication here is clear. Rosaria was brought here, likely lured by Sullivan, to serve as Aldrich's plaything. She was locked within the bedchamber, forced to endure unimaginable torment. Over time, as Aldrich bloated and grew to an enormous size, it seems he grew tired of trying to fit through the gate meant to hold his prey hostage. So he bends the metal structure to better accommodate him. The magnitude and type of damage gives us a hint as to his size, and I find the view from directly outside of Rosaria's room to be haunting. The display of enormous size and animalistic strength embodied in the destroyed gate, juxtaposed with the small, frail woman waiting on the bed. But by the time Aldrich destroyed the gate to Rosaria's cell, she no longer had the will to even try to escape. I'd like to take a moment to compare Rosaria to her mother, Guinevere, as I find the differences between these two to be an intentional commentary on the corruption of fertility and womanhood. We find Guinevere in, realistically, a very similar setting. And while I know that this isn't the real her, the illusion is made in her image, based on Gwendolen's memory of her. She too sits on a bed within her room, waiting for our approach. She's seen as a symbol of fertility, and we see this emanating from her. She's bathed in a golden light. She wears a revealing attire, and she's beautiful. Now, compare this to Rosaria, who's also known for her fertility, literally known as the mother of rebirth. But take a look at her aura. She sits hunched, her pale skin clinging to her frail frame. She too wears a revealing garment, with her entire chest nearly exposed. But while Guinevere's attire seems to have been made to accentuate her body, the neckline of Rosaria's dress looks like it's been stretched or ripped, as though to forcefully expose her body. And while we're on the topic of their clothing, I want to point out one more interesting difference. Guinevere is clad in a white dress, striking against her tanned complexion. She's a symbol of purity, an embodiment of the beauty of womanhood. Rosaria wears a black dress, a harsh contrast to her pale, sickly complexion. She also represents fertility, but the dark side of it. She symbolizes the horror that ensues when a woman's body is stolen, used to serve the most base desires of men. Rosaria and Guinevere are designed to represent two sides of the same coin, and I want to take a second to applaud the devs on their ability to so beautifully and tactfully accomplish this. One of the most impressive aspects of this story is that we can interpret all of this from a character that is entirely mute. Rosaria does not speak, and as her in-game description tells us, it is said that Rosaria, the mother of rebirth, was robbed of her tongue by her firstborn, and has been waiting for their return ever since. But who is this firstborn? And did they literally take her tongue? So, before we get too into the weeds with this, I want to establish something. I don't believe that Rosaria literally doesn't have a tongue. Rather, I believe that the term robbed of her tongue is meant to symbolize a vow of silence, a refusal to speak until her firstborn is returned to her. But how exactly did they come to be separated? Well, I think it can be inferred that Rosaria's firstborn, along with all of her other children, were fathered by Aldrich. We know from the story of Aldrich, and by continuation, Henri and Horace, that he devoured countless men, women, and children indiscriminately. And what reason would he have to not do the same to his own flesh and blood? It's not as though he hoped to produce an heir, as he had no desire of ever passing on his power. The question becomes, though, did Rosaria know what he planned to do with their children? When she fell pregnant with their first child, could she have had any inclination as to the child's fate? I find it doubtful. I believe that the moment she realized what was to become of her baby, she understood a truth too terrible to bear, and in that moment, she made a vow that she wouldn't speak until she could once again hold her baby. She wouldn't give her captor the satisfaction of hearing the cries that so deeply pleased him. She would turn to stone, refusing herself the relief of speaking, of mourning, until she could once again hold the lost fruit of her womb. And in the years that would follow, she devoted herself to developing the power that her mother had granted her, the power of rebirth. If she could learn to harness this power to its fullest potential, maybe she could bring back what had been taken from her. And this would be the power on which she would form her covenant, offering her loyal followers the chance to be reborn. There is a catch, though, as being reborn too many times results in the manifestation of this grub-like appearance. This could be explained as Rosaria having yet to master the skill, or maybe it's a reflection of her loss. From the little that we see of Aldrich, we know that he has an amorphous and inhuman form, still evident even after he's devoured Gwendolyn. So, is it really a far stretch to infer that his offspring could have looked something like this? If Rosaria began honing her power of rebirth in the hopes that she could resurrect her devoured children that probably looked something like this, it could explain why her power affects her followers in this way. She looks at her followers and sees her children, and the more times that she performs miracles over them, the more this begins to physically manifest. She shares her bed with one of these creatures, who looks notably more deformed than the rest. She gave this man the gift of rebirth so many times that he came to bear a striking resemblance to her firstborn child, her greatest loss. And it's through this line of reasoning that we can get an idea of what her firstborn and other children actually would have looked like. Creatures conceived of incomprehensible horror and violence, still loved unconditionally by the mother that endured it all. But interestingly, we do actually have an idea of who this man grub is, or maybe was. At the time of the cathedral's creation, there were 3 archdeacons within the Way of White charged with its management. Each of these holy men served a different purpose within the cathedral, but our focus rests on one of them specifically. Archdeacon Klimt was, at some point after Rosaria's arrival, tasked with looking after her. We don't know what exactly this entailed initially, but we do know that as he watched over her, a fondness began to develop. While the other members of the cathedral remained blind to the horror that Aldrich was becoming, Archdeacon Klimt seemed to be very aware of it. Perhaps it's because he spent so much time with Rosaria, a victim of Aldrich, that he couldn't turn a blind eye to the evil within this once sacred place of worship. When Aldrich eventually set off for Irithyll, Klimt saw this as his opportunity to free himself, instead devoting himself entirely to Rosaria. I think that he was her first follower, and this is supported when we look at the Rosaria's Fingers Covenant item, which reads, Sacred Seal of Archdeacon Klimt, who served Rosaria, Mother of Rebirth, equipped to pledge oneself to the Rosaria's Fingers Covenant. Klimt's seal is literally the symbol for this covenant. His involvement here cannot be understated. Perhaps he's the one that began spreading word of Rosaria's gifts after Aldrich left, acting as her voice so that she could fulfill her vow. Eventually, he becomes the first person to be reborn through her, the first to become one of her man-grubs. This transformation is seen as the highest honor within the covenant, and I think it's safe to assume that he underwent it not only willingly, but eagerly. The second named Covenant member that I want to discuss is Yellowfinger Hazel, a Xanthus scholar that somehow came to be a devout follower of Rosaria. The Xanthus group is composed of scholars seeking to uncover the mysteries of Oolacile, specifically its elusive sorceries. Hazel is identifiable as a member thanks to her armor set, unique in both color and shape. The description for the Golden Scroll reads as follows. In the lost land of Oolacile, the sorceries orchestrated light and were said to shine in golden hues. In reverence of these sorceries, the scholars adopted a golden attire, and a crown that is, quote, an imitation of a divine creature of Oolacile. This group has extensive lore, but our interest at the moment lies in how Hazel specifically came to be in the service of Rosaria. And I think that there are two likely options here, both relying on the little bit that we know about her as a character. Leonhard, who I'll be discussing next, has a piece of dialogue about Hazel that I find very illuminating.
Like Yellowfinger, you can choose to believe that all fingers share camaraderie, but do not force your romance upon the rest of us.
From this, we can characterize her as trusting, eager to be a part of a community, and this is reinforced by her involvement with the scholars, an incredibly small group united on the front of intellectualism. So now that we know this about her, let's theorize. On one hand, it's possible that word of Rosaria's talents began to spread as Aldrich's grip on her loosened. Hazel may have caught wind of this mysterious woman performing miracles and been intrigued. Considering what we know about the Xanthus scholars, it does make sense that a rumor like this would draw their attention. Hazel could have traveled to find Rosaria and subsequently become intertwined with her. The other theory that I find likely is that Hazel found herself in some trouble, maybe separated from her group and lost in an unfamiliar land. She stumbles upon the sprawling Cathedral of the Deep and ventures inside, thus beginning her story with Rosaria. But regardless of how this story actually begins, its conclusion remains the same. Hazel devotes herself to Rosaria not just in mind, but in body. Sometime after we first meet Hazel, a new man-grub will appear in Rosaria's bedchamber. The creature won't be hostile, but if you do kill it, it'll drop a Xanthus crown and Hazel's pick. In the end, Hazel decided to completely devote herself to Rosaria, choosing to live in the image of her lost children. Remember what Leonhard said about her sense of camaraderie and trust. I think that Hazel, by whatever sequence of events, found Rosaria's covenant and became enthralled by the bond that it offered her. The exact reason for this, I think, is unknowable, but I do hope that in the end, Hazel found what she was looking for. And finally, I want to discuss the member that gets the most screen time in-game, Ringfinger Leonhard. Not only can we speak with him, but he has an entire questline for us to complete. It begins in Firelink Shrine, where he gifts us a series of items, encouraging us to go out and pillage souls. Once we've proven ourselves, he tells us that we too could become a finger like him. We need only pledge ourselves to Rosaria. If we do so, he encourages us, but makes clear that we're only united insofar as it serves her.
So, you've chosen to serve Rosaria after all. She will be pleased with me for finding her another finger. But be warned, my friend. Rosaria's fingers need only fetch tongues for their mistress. Otherwise, we are free, unchained.
Leonhard is the exact opposite of Hazel when it comes to motivation, and I think that this is intentional. While Hazel is drawn to the sense of community that the Covenant offers her, Leonhard's only concern is Rosaria. If you attack him, he says the following.
I see, as clear as day. You are a vile, starved beast, much too dangerous for her.
Keep in mind that he says this when you attack him. He's the one in danger, and yet his only thought is of his goddess. There's a lot to unpack with the rest of his questline, but before we get into that, let's try to figure out who Leonhard actually is. The description for his armor set reads as follows. Leonhard was born into royalty, which is believed to be the reason for his skill in both sorcery and swordsmanship. In his youth, Leonhard suffered grave burns to his entire body. His face in particular, which he hid beneath his mask, was terribly scalded. He abstained from restoring these injuries, even after becoming a finger of Rosaria. This is a lot of non-specific information, but taking a look at his weapon, the Crescent Moon Sword, helps us to narrow it down. Ringfinger Leonhard's weapon of choice, a type of shotel imbued with the power of the moon. Leonhard set out on a journey of rebirth, but decided instead to serve the goddess as a knight and inherited this weapon. The fact that his weapon of choice is imbued with moon magic draws a connection to Gwendolyn, who's known to have an affinity for it. And I think it's entirely possible that Gwendolyn is actually the one who gave him the weapon. We know from his armor set that Leonhard was born into a royal family. Could this have put him in close proximity with the royal family in Anor Londo? Leonhard clearly has a connection to Guinevere, as we'll discuss soon that he takes Rosaria's soul to her bedchamber. He's entirely devoted to Rosaria. I'd argue more so than any of the other members that we meet. And this would make sense if he shared a close bond with her mother and uncle. He was initially on a journey to become reborn, which to me means that he wanted to find a way to heal the tremendous scarring on his face and body. But then something changed. He completely abandoned this goal and instead devoted himself to Rosaria. Not because of what she could do for him, but because of her. So what caused this shift? I think that Leonhard, while on a journey to heal his body, found himself back in the place he grew up, in Orlando. By this point, Guinevere had long since fled, but Gwendolyn still remained. Could Gwendolyn have known about the peril his niece was in? There's no real reason to assume that he wouldn't have known, as he could have received word in any number of ways. Upon encountering Leonhard, Gwendolyn implored him to protect the girl, passing down a weapon imbued with his moon magic to aid him. Leonhard would have had reason to oblige him considering his long-standing relationship with the family. Not to mention the fact that Rosaria was literally known as the Mother of Rebirth, giving him another reason to want to seek her out. And this theory is further supported later in Leonhard's quest, which we'll soon get into. So we now know what led Leonhard to seek her out and where he got his weapon from. But what led to his shift in motivation? We know that he chose to dedicate himself to Rosaria, but never accepted her gift of rebirth, the very thing that he'd been seeking. Why? Let's imagine for a second that we are in Leonhard's place. We've been sent to seek out and protect the daughter of a family very dear to us, perhaps without knowing what kind of trouble she's really in. We arrive at the cathedral, maybe expecting to find her being held prisoner. Instead, we find that she's been stripped of every dignity imaginable, reduced to so little that she doesn't even have the will to escape now that her captors have gone. Would you still be concerned about your scars? About asking a favor of a woman who truly has nothing left to give? In that moment, I believe that something fundamental changes within Leonhard. Keeping in mind his closeness to Guinevere, he no doubt sees her reflected in Rosaria, sees how her beauty and vitality have been perverted and defiled. He makes direct reference to this at the end of his questline, which we'll now get into. The conclusion to this quest is admittedly rather jarring. Upon visiting Rosaria's bedchamber, you find her corpse. Leonhard has killed her. You will then find that he's taken her soul to Guinevere's bedchamber, and upon confronting him, we get insight into his true feelings.
Felt sorry for the poor thing in all her festering glory, and now you want to ravage her soul as well. I, Leonhard, swear so upon my vows to the goddess. No one will despoil her soul.
His horror at what's been done to her is on full display here, and he is wholly concerned with protecting the small bit of purity that she has left, that being her soul. But Rosaria isn't really dead here. We know this because we can put her soul back into her corpse, restoring her to her original form. So while this initially seems like a murder, I don't really see it that way. I see it more like a cleansing. Leonhard has helped Rosaria shed her defiled flesh, stripping her down to the only part unsullied by the touch of men. He references a vow that he made to her, leading me to believe that this has been their plan all along. He brings her soul to Anor Londo, hoping that Gwendolyn will be able to help them, not knowing that Gwendolyn has been killed by the same man responsible for defiling Rosaria. This questline is so unbelievably sad, and there's really no good ending. Either you leave them in Orlando, waiting for help that's never going to arrive, or you kill Leonhard and return Rosaria's soul back to the flesh that she so desperately wants to escape. Rosaria's story explores themes of motherhood and sexual abuse so tactfully that if you blink, you'll miss it. And that's far from a criticism. This game really serves as a Rorschach test wrapped in the skin of a gothic horror, and I love that. Rosaria never speaks, not even once, and yet we just spent the last 20 minutes interpreting her story and character. And while that could maybe be attributed to my obsessive personality, let's just call it good game design. And to get ahead of the comments that I can feel you writing, I know that I left out 2 characters in this story. I made the decision to leave Crichton out of this video just because of how much lore he has. It tracks back to DS2, and I really wanted to keep this video as DS3 focused as possible. And on top of that, I really want to make a video for him specifically in the future, so I thought it'd be better to just wait for that instead of trying to water down his lore to fit into this video. And as for Longfinger Kirk, that was more of a failure on my part. I honestly forgot that he existed until I was wrapping up the script, and because he isn't really that impactful to the story, I just decided to leave him out. Chastise me if you must for that decision, but I've been really anxious to get this video written, filmed, and edited for you guys. I just didn't really feel like his inclusion changed much of anything besides how long that process took me. On a different note, I've been getting really into streaming on the channel. As of now, it's just been my first playthrough of DS2, but I do hope to eventually start playing other stuff at your guys' request. I try to give a heads up a few hours before I go live, but sometimes it's kind of just spontaneous. So if you do miss a stream, I have them all saved on a playlist for your viewing pleasure. And I'll also have a link to my Discord posted in the description if you want to come hang out and chat. But that's all I really have for this video. This is my longest one yet, and I'm really happy with how it turned out, so I hope that you enjoyed watching it. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, don't go hollow.